This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Appreciate Grant Hall's time on these Wednesday mornings. It's always fun talking with him. Grant, how are you today? Did you lose any power? You go outside this morning?
Our house has no power, and so, in fact, last night I couldn't get up my hill. There were about 7 or 8 cars, SUVs, everything, couldn't make it up where I live. So I just parked down the hill, walked back down this morning, and I'm down in town there, actually next to Lewis Ford, where I got this Mustang. And they didn't have any power this morning, but the Chrysler building did. So here I am doing it in this building.
Here I am with this Mustang. You got a Shelby? Are you a Shelby enthusiast? You like the Cobras, Grant?
Are you talking about my car?
5.0 liter.
All I know is, I won it. Made a hole in one a couple of years ago and won that
Whatever.
car.
Are you serious? How
he
cool!
Did. He told us about this before. That's right. I forgot about that.
That's awesome.
But, last night the sensors, I'm finding more about this thing. When I try to get up the hill, it says something about the sensor, and it kind of cut power a little bit, where you're not going to, you're not going to make it up the hill without that much power. So I'm still kind of figuring it out, get into snow mode, stuff like that. But I'm glad I went to the game because, that was one of the more memorable games. I was talking to Bob Holt about the time that Nolan Richardson expected about 1,000 fans, and about 19,000 showed up. And last night, Eric said he thought there might be 2,000 fans there, and he said maybe 14,000, and there were so many students that it really reminded me a little bit of Barnhill Arena in terms of you forget what the intensity of the noise, especially a lot of young people there like that. A lot of them probably hadn't been to the game all year. And they had a big time, and of course, the game ended up okay too.
Yeah, student noise is a little bit different than adult noise in most cases. What was the scene after the game? I mean, getting out of the arena, was it mass chaos, or was everything sort of?
Well, I waited. By the time all the interviews were over and everything, it was pretty much a ghost town by then. But there were a few people who told me they were leaving early to kind of get ahead of the traffic out of there. But there were a couple of interesting things Mike Kaywood came up with. He said Arkansas is now 9-1, avenging a loss in the same season under Eric Musselman. The only time they didn't, I think, was Mississippi State one time. But also, the 40 points, I think that was tied for 10th lowest yield, and what they called the modern era. I said, "What's the modern era?" And he said 1978. Well, still remember that pretty well. But the worst by an SEC opponent, 25.9%. I think that was the 5th worst shooting percentage by an opponent against Arkansas. And of course, they were 3 for 25 in the first half. But I tell you, to me, Devo Davis is, and Eric talked about it last night, becoming the leader of this team. Mm-hmm. They've been looking for some internal leadership, as he called it, and he said at times they've been kind of a quiet team this year. But he's doing it on the floor and off the floor. Even called a timeout on his own last night, which Eric said Devo's done 3-4 times since he's been at Arkansas. And he said he knew I wasn't going to call a timeout, so, have a little bit of trouble against the press, and so he did that. And Devo's been in the gym 2-3 times a day. Eric got there at 7:06 the other morning, and Devo had already been shooting for a while. So and it showed up. It showed up in the last 4 or 5 games.
He's getting his shot. I mean, all 3 of those guards. But the thing I've noticed the last couple games, I don't know what you've noticed, but his shots that he's getting to his spot, and he's able to. They're not really contested. Like, he's getting to his spot and getting open shots, and he's shooting them with confidence. And his defense. I don't even know if we talk about it enough, but I always feel like I lead with it. His defense is just first class defense as well.
Yeah, and he actually was on both of their leading guys. I mean, Adam Miller and Williams. I guess I think Miller scored 9 points, which Devo pointed out that's about.
They didn't have anybody in double figures. Yeah, LSU had 0.
No.
Yeah.
But what Eric also pointed out that Devo's shot selection has been unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
I think last night he was 7 out of 8. And we can remember some times in the past where his shots, some of them are kind of odd looking anyway, but his whole deal, it's at a timely moment now. And as Eric said, as you said, he said his defense is fabulous every night.
It's been an interesting. I mean, he's had an interesting career at Arkansas, but really, like the last 7 weeks or so, just going back to when he stepped away from the team for a game, and we didn't know.
Was he like 7 days or something? Yeah,
or what the situation was. You could tell that something had happened in Maui, but he came back, and man, it's like everybody asked, "Who's the leader of this team? Who are the leaders of this team?" Sometimes you can't really tell until you hit a bit of a low
some
point.
Adversity. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and when
look
when you only have
since the low points,
you only had 2 players that were even here last year, but yet Devo's been to 2 Final 8s, and he said last night, he said this team is destined for greatness. Now, right now, it just feels like you're trying to win a game every time out, as they call it, the Super Bowl. But I heard Jimmy Dykes say before my power went out last night, when I got back home, I heard him say that Nick Smith will be back in a couple of weeks. So, and by the way, I talked to Marty Smith a little bit last night. I had met him at the Masters one time, and as you can imagine, a fun guy. But he said that for the crowd last night, he thought on a night like that was just unbelievable.
I guess he and Boss Hogg had a little mix up or something, or he got his coffee spilled by the giant blow up mascot or something. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Marty Smith is an interesting. I think he's an interesting choice for sideline, because sometimes it's almost like he's doing Marty and McGee on the sideline. But I mean, he's really entertaining, and it was for the most part a pretty good broadcast last night. I think Tom Hart. I mean, he was asking, should I drive to Little Rock or do you think I can get a flight out of XNA? And it sounded like he was able to get a flight out of XNA. How much of yesterday, though, Grant, do you put on also? Look, I don't want to take anything away from the win, because I think they played well enough. LSU right now is terrible. They looked awful. I mean, they couldn't have hit the broadside of a barn with a lob pass or a shot or a layup attempt at times.
Yeah, it's weird, and then they came out with that 15-2 run or whatever it was in the first part of the second half, and as their coach said afterwards, that was the kind of game we were looking for. He just felt they couldn't do much in the first half, couldn't get into what they wanted to do because they weren't making any shots. But you could see, at least during about a 10-minute stretch there, how they could have been decent early. Of course, they did beat Arkansas. But, yeah, he's up against it. I mean, the big one now, of course, I think, is Saturday at Baylor. Baylor's ranked 17th, and not so much for Arkansas. Obviously, it's not an SEC game, but, I mean, that's something that could really help you if you ended up being a bubble team. If you could beat them on the road, they put a whole lot of value in that. So, sort of go in there, maybe take your free shot at it, and then if it doesn't work, then you're back to playing Texas A&M here.
Well, it's like the idea of acting like you got to play like you got nothing to lose. You can't play tight. I think as the losses began to gather up a little bit over that 1-5 start, there was like a tightness. I think players started to feel some pressure. I like to hear Devo say this team is about to get up, is about to explode or whatever it was that he said, because it looked to me like, I mean, they didn't have their best offensive game, but they're playing with energy. They're playing with, and you see this with Devo too. Like, he's got some spring in his step. I want to believe that they're about to get on a run, but I can't believe it until I see at least one road win.
And what complicates it is, Mikel Mitchell is still out. He's day-to-day, Eric told us after the game. In fact, he said he was suited up, but his shoes weren't tied, and he just didn't want, you're already down, you're down 3 guys, and I guess he felt better with just him being on the bench there. So maybe he might not be out too long. But again, I mean, if what Jimmy says is accurate, then 2 weeks would work out to about February 7th, which is at Kentucky. And whether you would want Nick Smith to, talk about another baptism under fire going to Kentucky at their place for your first game back. But hopefully somewhere in there is the timetable.
Yeah, you kind of got to go to war with the guys that you got, and then when he shows up, you put your arms around your brother and you welcome him back into the team. And it's always easiest to welcome back the best player. So it's easy to integrate him into the offense.
Yeah, and it's if and when it happens, it is going to be interesting to see how they, because we've been talking about, Devo's the acknowledged leader of the team now, and of course Anthony Black plays all these minutes. Last night, Ricky Council played almost 40 minutes, so he came back from his bad game with a good one.
He found something. I thought he did well, considering his shot wasn't necessarily as good as it always is, because he's no doubt he's a scorer, but he did other things. I thought he found other way. And when it seemed like those other games when his shot wasn't falling, he didn't find other things to do, and that's what I was really impressed with. That his shot wasn't falling. Hey man, let's get some assists, let's get some rebounds, and I thought that he did that really well. 7
assists, and I think 6 defensive rebounds. Those were good numbers for him.
Grant, I got to switch the conversation over to the Baseball Hall of Fame. One player inducted. I kind of thought when we brought it up yesterday, there was a good chance nobody was going to be inducted again, which would have been 3 times in the last 10 years or so. And I mean, there's 2 conversations to have about this. One, I think it's good when players are inducted into the Hall of Fame, multiple players. You get to celebrate careers, puts a spotlight on the game and on history, recent history in some cases, which people love. And then there's the other aspect of the Hall of Fame that people, it feels like writers want to keep it almost incredibly exclusive. I feel like there are a couple of players that aren't getting votes that probably are real Hall of Famers when you look at the course of their career. And I'm thinking of Andrew Jones, thinking of Jeff Kent, maybe Todd Helton too. Congratulations to Scott Rowland to get in. I want to see more players in the Hall of Fame. I'm kind of an inclusive Hall of Fame guy. How do you feel about it?
Well, it's interesting to see the progression that Rowland started out not getting that many votes, and then he got a lot last year. And, of course, as a Cardinals fan, I'm thrilled. And actually, I'm wondering if he's going to go in with a Cardinal uniform, or because he played one more year at Philadelphia than he did at St. Louis, but in St. Louis had that great 06, and
won World Series with him, too. Yeah. Players don't get to choose what hat they wear. I think it's up to the people in the hall.
Is that how they do it? Well,
I think so. I don't think the player chooses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, he obviously was a great 8 Gold Gloves, I think, and there was one season where he got a bad injury in one of his better years and kind of shut him down. But of course, I'm glad to see him go in. I kind of hear what you're saying about. To me, Helton probably is a Hall of Famer. My gosh, 18 years of pretty good consistency. But I think that, again, I think the Hall of Fame people probably worry, what do they do if you have, as you said, 2 out of 3 years and no inductees, then that kind of messes them up, no ceremony and stuff.
Now, was Scott Rowland, did he wear batting gloves or he didn't wear batting gloves? Was he one of those guys?
I think he probably did.
He did.
The ones that don't are the exceptions. Matt Carpenter, I don't think wears batting gloves.
Right.
Yeah. By the way, guys, and quickly, I went to Dave's press opportunity last week, and Phil, I'm sure you followed all of it, but Dave said during that time that this is the most depth of pitching he's ever had. He said, "How about that? I mean, that's a mouthful for a coach that has had his success to say." And they're pretty excited. Probably not excited about the weather right now, but they're excited about the coming season.
Yeah, but I think it's also true is what he's saying. It's a ridiculous amount of power arms. I think there might have been other years where you had a really deep pitching staff. It's just they weren't all, and this is the way the game is now. But, I mean, you get probably, 8 guys that are throwing 94 miles an hour, if not harder than that. I mean, I feel like in the back of their minds, they know what the weekend rotation is going to look like to start the season. But there's too many good arms to not have a competition over the next few weeks before the season begins.
Yeah, and there might not be quite as much home run power, but I really liked what he said about going first to third, maybe stealing more bases. Really, that sounds like getting back to more of what Dave did when he got here. And of course, your personnel dictates what you do, but what he likes to do is have a guy, look the center fielder right in the eye and go from first to third on this thing, because those are big plays. So I hope we see a lot of that this year.
I do wonder about the team speed a little bit, but then speed doesn't necessarily have much to do with stealing bases and ability to run bases and go first to third. That's instincts, and that's technique, and you know they're going to be teaching that technique.
BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting this season. Everything from the NFL and bowl season to esports. You'll find the latest odds, team matchup info, player news, and game trends at BetOnline. BetOnline features live betting, free contests, and live scores for almost any sport or game imaginable. We're the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite leagues and events. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV. BetOnline, where the game starts.